So Max Blumenthal recently was on Tim Pool's show. I don't know about you guys, but I don't watch Tim Pool's show. I think I've only talked about him once on this channel. But I imagine a lot of you probably don't watch Tim Pool either. So I think there are certain things in this conversation that's really important that I want you guys to hear. So obviously, given the recent events between Israel and Palestine, Max Blumenthal was there. I felt in a way to educate the other panelists that were there, part of the show. And I sincerely hope he did so, because I watched this interview. We're only going to show like part of it, but I watched this interview and it was very clear to me that Tim Pool and the other commentators that were part of this discussion, they really weren't well versed when it came to the issue between Israel and Palestine. Like at one point during the interview, Tim Pool actually says, yeah, like I'd like to get someone on that's Jewish and give me that perspective as well. And Max Blumenthal says, well, I am Jewish. I'm sorry. It was just funny because I was like, you didn't know who you were talking to, Tim. I gotta stop. It's not even Friday and I'm already wilding. All right, let's go ahead and get into this discussion here with Tim Pool.
There's plenty of evidence that they killed innocent people. There's plenty of evidence that they, carried out what amounts to a terror attack. It's not a military operation. There's plenty of evidence. So
there are videos you don't want to watch.
Absolutely. And I don't need to believe that they were cutting off babies' heads to condemn the attack on Israel. So, if it turns out that it happened, I'm not shocked. I mean, I was alive when ISIS, when the Islamic State was in existence, and I saw videos of them cutting off people's heads and doing terrible things. I remember 9/11. You don't need to have this particular thing to be real to be like, okay, terrorists do really horrible things with the intent of terrorizing people.
I'm curious what you think, Max.
Yeah, I would be shocked. First of
So let me just pause here for a second and just add that was already debunked multiple times. That was also debunked by the Israeli media as well. This shirt is giving me problems. The Israeli media as well. So just FYI, I'm not sure they could have recorded this episode, before that information was released. So just keep that in mind. But that has already been debunked.
of all, because Hamas is mortally opposed to ISIS and Salafi elements. They've actually battled them in the streets in Rafah before. They consider them a threat to their stability, and Israeli intelligence actually has worked with Salafi elements in Gaza to destabilize Hamas, just as Israeli intelligence supported Hamas to destabilize the PLO when it controlled Gaza in the 1980s. So I would be shocked if they employed something like this. The only source so far on this story is one Israeli soldier who's a very interesting character. We've traced his identity at the Gray Zone. And it comes through a state-sponsored Israeli media organization, as you pointed out, I-24, the reporter Nicole Sedek, who just went to Kfar Aza and said, I'm hearing that babies were beheaded. Right. Then the Israeli Foreign Ministry goes and blasts it out. 40 babies beheaded. Why? Because the U.S. bombed the crap out of ISIS in Raqqa, that we destroyed half of the city of Raqqa, and that's what Israel wants us to do to Iran. They want us to see Hamas as ISIS and then to get involved in their regional conflicts. So they're pushing this story. The source is a Israeli.
Let's pause here for just a second. We'll go back to what he says the source is. So do you guys see what's happening here? Okay. Again, like I said, they have debunked this story, but people were continuing to spread it. Like this news went across like almost every mainstream media outlet that I saw the other day. Like everybody was repeating that talking point. There was no evidence of it. Nobody actually saw that. All it took was for one person to say it and it spread like wildfire. But what Max is trying to tell you is there's a reason for that narrative and what they're really trying to do. This could be the step in the U.S. government engaging in an all-out war against Iran. Because when we look back on it, what did they say? They said that Iran actually funded Hamas, right? So you see, this could be, and how do you put the shock into the American people? You shock the American people by talking about children. That's something that obviously is going to make people feel a certain way. But which children? Because they didn't really want you talking about the Palestinian children. Okay, let's go on.
Soldier named Davidi Benzion, who is a settler leader. He's from one of the fanatical wings of Israeli politics. And he, he's a reservist. He's serving in the military. But he got in trouble earlier this year because he called for an entire Palestinian village to be wiped off the map next to his illegal settlement in the West Bank. And he's the guy that she's interviewing as her credible witness. I don't trust it. And as you said, Israel has enough to go on right now to try to portray itself, even though it's the occupier and besieger of the Gaza Strip, according to international law, to portray itself as a victim. Why do they need to do this? It's because they're trying to draw the U.S. in.
I agree with that for sure. Because that's why everybody immediately brings up the New York testimony. What will shock Americans to the most extreme degree to justify U.S. involvement?
You should break that down, though. Like
the New York testimony?
Yeah.
I mean, I can break it down. We have the Wikipedia pulled up. False testimony given to the United States Congressional Human Rights Caucus, October 10th, 1990, by a 15-year-old girl who was publicly identified by the time by her first name, Nayira. The testimony was widely publicized and was cited numerous times by U.S. senators and George H.W. Bush in their rationale to support Kuwait in the Gulf War. In 1992...
Let me pause there for a second because we're not going to play that video on here. But this young woman here, basically it was revealed that she actually lied when she said that she saw them, killing the children or slaughtering the children. That was a lie. And this woman, this story spread like wildfire. And this is what the U.S. government was able to use to say, okay, we got to go in. So the point that Max is making is that this is potentially what they could be doing now. So let me fast forward a little bit here. Here we go.
All real. He had to bring in from local shops ice cream coolers to store dead babies in because the mortuaries had run out of space. And now we see Israel attacking the hospital in Beit Hanun in the north is completely out of commission. All of these hospitals are coming under.
Let me go back just a little bit. Sorry about that. So you understand what he's talking about. Okay. So I think this is where he gets into his experience there.
Some babies were killed. Yes, absolutely. If they're coming into a kibbutz and they're shooting, yeah, there's crossfire. I see kids killed in Chicago, right? And you're in an active conflict zone, likely going to happen. I think it's possible that the most reasonable and rational thing that I would say highest probability in terms of this being truthful is that a couple babies died. One had this is such a horrible thing to say, but severely injured to the point of decapitation. And then someone passes it along and Purple Monkey dishwashes itself, telephones itself into 40 babies killed, beheaded, and a more extreme version of the story. But now it serves a political purpose. So it escalates to a point where Fox News is reporting it, headline, as though it's, proven. The challenging thing is, what do you need? How do you prove it? What do you do if this is true, if they're not lying?
Well, there's another purpose to it, which is to deflect from the obviously true, real videos of babies being killed by Israeli airstrikes all across the Gaza Strip. When I was in Gaza in 2014, I went to Khan Yunis, which is in the southeast, had been completely destroyed at its eastern edge by the Israeli military. And the casualties were so intense that the hospital started filling up in Khan Yunis. And I went to a small hospital and talked to the head of the hospital, and he showed me photos. And these photos are on my Twitter page from the time, all real. He had to bring in from local shops ice cream coolers to store dead babies in because the mortuaries had run out of space. And now we see Israel attacking the hospital in Beit Hanun in the north is completely out of commission. All of these hospitals are coming under attack. So babies are dying in the Gaza Strip. There's video right now. Jackson Hinkle just tweeted a video of a father carrying his baby out of the rubble. There's another video on Times of Gaza, a local publication, of a father putting his infant daughter to sleep for the last time. And they've completely erased these casualties. They've always been erased. And that's part of...
That's right. Let me chime in here for just a second. I just want to let you guys know, like, if it's not for the independent media that's there in the Gaza Strip, we would not have this information. You know, this is the kind of information they wanted to keep hidden for quite some time. So Max Blumenthal, like, has written a book about this. Abby Martin has a documentary about this. I highly recommend you guys should either read these books or watch these documentaries, particularly that one by Abby Martin is very informative. But the other thing that I just saw yesterday is that they are shutting down Al Jazeera in Gaza. So Al Jazeera's international news outlet. So they're already making it so that Al Jazeera cannot report information from there to show you what's happening, what's going on there. So had it not been for journalists like Anya was there, Kim Iverson has been there. Kim will actually be on, I'm recording with her tomorrow, so that'll premiere Saturday. But Kim's going to talk about what she witnessed when she was there. Of course, Max has been there. Abby Martin's been there. Like, there's been several independent journalists that have been there to cover this. And had it not been for them, we would be in the dark because they don't want people to know. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine, especially this country of all countries, trying to find ways to cover up or make excuses for apartheid? Let's continue.
What fuels the violence and the ruthlessness that we see from these fighters is that they want to avenge what they call their martyrs, and that fuels what is, you know, referred to as the cycle of violence. This is the invisibilization of them.
So you think that some Hamas fighters they target civilians because civilians in Gaza are targeted?
Well, first of all, let's point out another thing that's being left out of the conversation. What CNN never showed this, Fox never showed this. They targeted military bases, primarily military bases like Nahal Oz that are maintaining the siege of Gaza, and they overwhelmed those bases and humiliated the fourth most powerful military on the planet with a blue water navy with nuclear weapons. Some of these fighters were filmed entering the bases with no shoes on. They're using homemade weapons, AK-47s, paragliders, fishing boats to get in. This is not a powerful army, and they humiliated them and Israelis' vaunted intelligence services. So they don't want to talk about that. And yes, they went in. A lot of these kibbutzim are right next to the bases. I've been to them.
Yeah, but they did, like, I mean, this is a terrorist attack. They went to a music festival and started killing people. So I get what you're saying. Like, they are definitely the underdogs and stuff. But like, to classify it, try and point out that it's, or to make it, to legitimize it as an actual military operation, I think totally glosses over the fact that they attacked civilians intentionally. They did.
Let me pause here for a second, because you know what I noticed when I was watching this conversation, particularly that part right there. It starts right there. What was Max just talking about? He was talking about what he saw when he was there. He talked about what happened at the hospitals, what was happening to the Palestinian people, right? What does Dude bring up? Notice Dude comes in and talks about, like, you know, Hamas targeting the music festival, which is true. You should not target innocent people. They should not have done that. But notice he had nothing to say in reference to the Palestinian casualties. He brought it right back to Hamas. And this is something I've seen happen on social media as well. Anytime you talk about what the Palestinian people have been going through and the casualties, people bring it right back to the state of Israel. Why is that? There is a strong presence, particularly in this country, of Islamophobia. Strong presence of it. Listen, Gaza isn't the first. I saw people react the same way with Syria, with the bombing, the people that were killed in Syria. No empathy, no compassion, because they're brown. And then you have the religious aspect, because the reality is people tend to, for the most part, it's like they only seem to have that sympathy for for victims that are white and Christian. No sympathy for the people that are killed in Somalia through the bombings, Yemen, none of it. So pay attention to that. Pay attention. And to answer someone's question, who was it that said that? Notori? Sebastian, why does Tim Pool always wear a beanie? I don't know. Does he always have that on? I guess so, huh? I don't know.
It was a military operation, and Israel is now attacking civilians intentionally.
They're not targeting.
Israel has a doctrine of targeting civilians intentionally. It's called the Dahiyya doctrine, and I can lay out what it is. But they believe that if they attack civilians and humiliate them, they will eventually rise up against their government. They tested it against Hezbollah in Lebanon, and it failed. It's being used against the civilians in the Gaza Strip. They want to lower their morale so much that they actually turn on
you're
Hamas.
still talking about you're talking about a retaliation, right? Like, because like I said again,
see, watch this. So listen to what Max is explaining to him, and notice he interrupts. Not only he couldn't wait to interrupt, right? Interrupts, and let's bring it back to what happened to the state of Israel. You see this?
This initially started, and granted, you I don't know the details about where if they attacked the military bases or whatever, and I'm not trying to push back on that. But the idea that this is just a military operation, they specifically went and started killing people at the festival. Like I mean, it has all of the.
Okay, I don't know. Let me just pause here for a second. He's talking about when it initially started. And I think what's really interesting, it reminds me when people argue about the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, because people say, well, this started because Russia invaded Ukraine, and they'll leave out what happened all those years before that about how NATO pushed, it pushed expansion, how there were opportunities for peace negotiation. Right. They'll leave out what happened all before those years. And Max Blumenthal is telling you how long this has been going on and what's happened to the Palestinian people. And it seems like this guy here just wants to erase all of that, what he just said before, and just wants to focus on the particular incident that happened this week. Pay attention to those types of things.
It reminds me of the Bataclan in Paris. Like, it's a terror attack. The point is so maybe if you want to say that the Israelis are terrorists as well, fine. Like, I'm not here to defend Israel, but the idea that the initial attack was a military operation or exclusively military, they attacked people and they went after civilians and killed people at a show.
When Max started to bring this up, I mean, I'm not interjecting because I want to hear what you have to say about what were they targeting in terms of military targets. I don't think it makes sense for Hamas to come in and just literally only target a music festival. Obviously, I think it's reasonable that they targeted a wide breadth of things. But I do agree with Phil. I mean, the problem is one of the arguments we're hearing is that they're breaking out of an open air prison. Well, okay, absolutely. I mean, I know people who are the families of those in Palestine, those who have come from Gaza, and absolutely have heard these arguments. But to then see them going to music festival and laughing about it, and grabbing people and throwing them on the ground. I suppose the argument is the videos are all fake or something, but there's videos of the guys walking up to cars and just shooting regular people, like just in their cars, who have no idea what's going on.
What's that Israeli doctrine of targeting civilians called?
Dahiyya doctrine. And they also, if you look up Israel and mowing the lawn, that's a common term that the Israeli military uses.
That ain't just the Israeli military. Blood makes the grass grow, homie.
But I brought this up before when I think I brought this up when I was on PBD on Saturday when this all went down. Back when Protective Edge happened in 2014, I did not cover this stuff. Mine was civil unrest, not civil war, not war. But speaking with many of the journalists who had covered the region, both in Israel and in Palestine, and these guys, I got to tell you, if you met them, you'd be like, they're middle of the road, milquetoast fence sitter types. They refer to it as mowing the lawn. They say Israel every couple of years will decimate parts of Gaza to reduce, as they described it, their military capabilities. But I'm curious if you want to elaborate on that.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many issues on the table. I mean, to the music festival, which is like the most, grisly thing, one of the most grisly things we've seen prior to Israel leveling entire neighborhoods in Gaza City, including neighborhoods I stayed in where many people actually are not friendly to Hamas. They're holding an EDM Molly-fueled music festival on the border.
The drugs that they're on do not matter. Like, it doesn't matter that they're doing.
Well,
that they're doing
okay,
sorry.
it doesn't matter what drugs they're on. You're right. What matters is they're holding a music festival on the border of a caged-in ghetto where people have very little water. They bathe in salt water in Gaza. I've done it. They bathe in salt water. They have 2 to 3 hours of electricity, and they're doing this right there, right next to a military base. And what appears to have happened.
Let's pause here for just a second. Let's talk about the hours of electricity. If you have 2 to 3 hours of electricity, that also means 2 to 3 hours of electricity for hospitals. So if you have an emergency, someone come through the ER and there's no electricity at that time, what do? These are things people have to think about. Like when they talk about the limited hours of electricity, that includes the hospitals. That doesn't just include electricity in your home, and it means that you can't turn on the lights and you can't watch TV.
And is a military base was targeted. This music festival became a target of opportunity, which is unfortunate and maybe gut wrenching. There's no way to justify it. And here's what the objective of these fighters, one of the main objectives, which is not really discussed properly in our media. And it doesn't matter if you support Israel or Palestine here, you have to acknowledge this objective. It's to get as many Israeli citizens into the hands of the authorities in Gaza to negotiate, because Israel is holding thousands and thousands of Palestinian captives in its prison. There is one guy named Hadar Anand who died this May after a 3-month hunger strike.
So you just said that the goal is to kidnap.
The goal is to spur negotiations and change the strategic
by kidnapping and bringing them back to Gaza. That's kidnapping. That's terrorist activity.
Israel,
that is not
Israel. I've watched Israel kidnap children. From
I am not saying that Israel's right.
Villages. No, it's not. It's not about this.
So you see what keeps happening here. So this was the part that was really interesting to me, where people want to express their sympathy towards, what's happening to the Israeli people, but not willing to have that same sympathy when those things are happening to the Palestinian people. And we've seen this happen before, right? We've seen this happen after September 11. I saw a great deal of Islamophobia in this country. A great deal. And I feel like that's starting all over again because of this particular issue. And so again, the focus is on where was this passion and fire from this dude, whatever dude's name is, where was this passion and fire and energy from this dude when those things were happening to the Palestinian people? Why is there so much outrage now, but you didn't have it before when it was happening to the other group?
Is not about right or wrong. It's about not seeing this in a stupid, emotional way. I'm not saying you're being stupid or emotional, but we are being cultivated in this country to be stupid and emotional by not trying to understand why this attack took place. Gilad Shalit was an Israeli soldier who was captured out of his tank in 2011 by fighters from Gaza, actually not affiliated with Hamas. And Israel was forced to exchange over 1,000 Palestinian prisoners, captives in the mind of Palestinians, for this one soldier. So now they have, let's say, 100 captives. They do not want them to die in Gaza because this is the only bargaining chip they've had after Palestinians have had every single diplomatic channel blocked to them. And they've even had food channels blocked to them.
People want us to take the most emotional approach to this. They're killing civilians and stuff. I think, that's typically my view. It's bad that they're doing that. I agree with Phil, but I do think it's absolutely fair to step back and say, why are they doing it and how do they view it?
And to do that involves some very ruthless shit.
Well,
yeah.
war's war, yeah.
Exactly. Kidnapping civilians, which they've explicitly said they will now execute unless Israel takes specific actions, like no more bombings, the return of other.
They said warn before bombing, because Israel's been bringing roofs down on the heads of entire families. A family of 19 was killed in Jabalia refugee camp. That's what they said.
They didn't. But the Palestinians didn't warn the Israelis that they were coming to the festival, right? They didn't warn the Israelis that they were coming in.
Let me go ahead and stop him right there and interrupt and correct something that he just said. He said, to that point, the Palestinians did not warn the Israeli people that they were coming to the festival. What is wrong with what he just said? because this is something I've seen other people do as well. He said, the Palestinians, the people who came to the festival were Hamas. And people need to be careful about saying the term, the Palestinians did this, because the other people who are not a part of Hamas, you should not, equate them with that particular group. That's one group. And then you have the rest of the other Palestinian people. But you see what he did with his rhetoric? He said the Palestinians didn't warn them when they came to the festival. No, stop that. It's just like when we point out certain things that the IDF does, we say the IDF. So I had to jump in there because I felt like, I'm like, wait a minute now, because see, people will hear that and internally they'll take that in. And then next thing you know, they'll start to have that same type. This is how the hatred starts. They'll start to have that same type of anger that they had for the act that happened towards a broad group of people. So we have to be careful, like, with the things that are said.
The festival was the target.
No, that's fine.
They
weren't warning. They weren't warning people. They weren't warning the Israelis that they were coming. So you're pointing out that the Israelis do warn the Palestinians, like, "Hey, this location, we are going to blow it up."
Yeah, like
I do. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think the Al-Qassam brigades warned Ashkelon that they were going to be firing a bunch of rockets.
Ashkelon.
I think
Yes, they did.
They should have warned.
And these
first.
areas are now mostly evacuated, but I've done interviews in Gaza, just like we're doing now, although maybe without the Malort. And I went up in Palestine Tower to do an interview in the middle of Gaza City. I walked up 9 flights of stairs because the electricity was off. Everything's running on generators there. And did some interviews. A few years later, Israel drops a warning flare on the roof of that media tower where all the journalists work and operate. I've also edited videos from there with some really nice Palestinian journalists, just cool people you would all like to hang out with, who would love to leave their little strip of land and can't. Anyway, and then Israel brings the whole tower down. There's video of it. So it's okay, they warn it, but why are they bringing down residential and office towers while everyone is silent? And
allegedly, because there's Hamas.
They always say
weapons.
that.
Well,
that building. I mean,
well, you asked the reason, so that's the reason they say, at least. So,
well, this is the challenge for those that are not involved, right? I'm anti-war. I think U.S. involvement in 99% of things is they're lies. I mean, I grew up on this stuff, right? All the lies to get us to put military bases surrounding Iran. John Bolton saying by this time next year we'll be celebrating in Tehran. It's bloodlust. So when I look at something like Israel, the challenge for me is I'm not nearly as involved as you, and I'm not nearly as zealous as many of like the neoconservatives and the more conservative base. So when rockets come flying from Gaza and start blowing up over Tel Aviv, and this was huge, right? This was like 2014 when the rockets first started reaching Tel Aviv. Was that? Because I remember I had a friend in Tel Aviv.
I was there at that time. Yeah.
Messaged me freaking out on Facebook that a rocket exploded over her house and this has never happened before and she doesn't know what to do. And I'm like, man, this is horror. It's horror. It's war. It's terrifying. How do we stop this? And so what ends up happening is every time I've engaged with it, again, not an expert on this stuff. I mean, I probably might know a little bit more than the average person, but it's like, I appreciate your perspective. I'm glad you're here to tell us about this stuff too. Because I think only talking to people who are on the more pro-Israel side is going to leave us, blind to the arguments from the other side. Yeah. But I hear Israel, they're using hospitals and schools and civilian areas to launch rockets from, knowing that it will make it extremely difficult for Israel to stop the rocket fire into civilian areas. Then I hear the same thing. But a media tower is taken down for what purpose? Why is Israel targeting this? And every time I hear this, my
media's communications.
I fall right back to this is war. And in war, there's no rules. Yeah. Rules are for, it's like this idea of war crimes I always find so silly. Like, obviously, we think some things are so egregious that even in war, they're a crime. But the people who win those wars don't care what you think because you're gone.
Well, there's supposed to be rules. That's the thing. Even in war, there are supposed to be rules. There are supposed to be, certain areas that you cannot target, like, right? So they're supposed to be there.
And so when I look at what's going on in Israel and Palestine, I know that you've got two factions that are going to use whatever arguments, whatever psychological warfare, whatever physical warfare they can to try and win this. And I know that there probably is a right side and someone's telling the truth. And I know for a fact there's an objective truth and lies to what's going on. I don't know how to navigate that.
Well, just 2 points on that. I mean, there's this issue of human shields. Like Biden said, Palestinians are human shields. That's a way of basically saying there are no civilians there at all. And the Gaza Strip is one of the most densely populated places
like
on
2
Earth.
million people.
There's it's 2 million people jammed. Why are they there? By the way, that most of them are refugees and they have to be there because they're not Jewish. They can't go back to the land of their families pre 1948.
Listen, I watched Palestinians. I watched them. I watched the IDF. I saw these videos. This was on local news. I watched them dragged. They were dragged out of their homes. I remember this. Like, I watched it. So it's like, what are these people supposed to do? When Kim comes on tomorrow, I'm gonna talk to her about, one of the issues that has come up. They were told to exit at one particular location, and then it was reported that that location was bombed, so they couldn't even leave. So essentially, they are trapped. So what are they supposed to do? 2 million people there, but half of them are children. So when Joe Biden uses that expression and he says, well, they're human shields, to Max's point, he's right. Basically, what Joe Biden's trying to tell you is, like, he's basically in a low key way trying to say that none of them are civilians. They're all bad.
They keep having kids. They're being warehoused there. There's surplus humanity. So it's like the logic of a prison. And so everybody there is a human shield. But there was a place I like to eat because it was real cheap in Tel Aviv that was right next to the defense ministry called Hakiria. And all the generals would be in there, the intelligence chiefs, good Mediterranean food. Are they human shields? Is building this giant tower in the middle of a residential area in Tel Aviv, are they making those people human shields? If that gets hit by Hezbollah and people die nearby, were they being used by Israel as human shields? No one will say that because the logic is so discriminatory towards Palestinians. No one will consider their position. And then the other point I wanted to make is just about the use of violence in this conflict by Palestinians who have tried everything. I mean, I don't know if you know about what the Great March of Return was, but it was sanctioned by Hamas, but it was a grassroots initiative in Gaza to just march without weapons like guns to the wall that surrounds them. And they were shot one by one in the legs. Many of them were killed. Journalists were killed covering it. It was a complete bloodbath. And that's when the society said, you know what, we can't win with this tactic of, walking to the fence and just asking them to let us in. They don't want us. Everyone ignored that. And now they're paying attention to the violence. In Gaza used to have 9,000 settlers in it. 9,000 settlers who took like 30 to 40% of the water in a place of 1.5 million people. Why did those settlers leave? It was because of the Second Intifada. It was because of the violence that was applied, and much more gruesome violence in many ways than we're seeing now, because this was the time of suicide bombings. People willing to die because they were so desperate, blowing themselves up in order to kill because they had no weapons at that point. Now, the factions in Gaza actually have reverse engineered Israel's military and they have weapons, so they don't need to do suicide bombing. So Gaza did that.
They got M4s too.
Hamas did that. Then what is the West Bank right now? It's controlled by the Palestinian Authority, which is funded partly through the EU and State Department. They don't resist Israel. In fact, they arrest Palestinians on behalf of Israel. And what do Palestinians have there? In many ways, they have the same prison-style situation as they have in Gaza, but with settlers all around them. So what does that tell Palestinians? It tells them the only way to get this off our back is through violence.
Are there Palestinians who live in Israel?
Yes.
In like Tel Aviv and all that? Are they?
They live mostly in an area south called Jaffa or Yafa.
Yeah. But I mean, like somebody who is of Palestinian.
They're 1.5 million Palestinian citizens of Israel, and they're said to have equal rights, but there are discriminatory laws on the books.
Yeah,
that's what I was going to ask
400
about.
mosques, right?
And this is where I bring in the point about the comparison between like what African Americans went through in this country is like, remember the whole separate but equal? Yeah, we were separate, but it wasn't equal, bud. It wasn't equal.
State, where there's a lot of poverty. And Rafah, the Rafah crossing between Gaza and Israel was bombed today with many people who are dual nationals trying to get out, as Netanyahu and the Israeli leadership are saying, leave Gaza and we won't bomb you, but they have nowhere to go. But, you know, on this issue of the solution, I mean, we're entering a very dangerous phase and we're looking at the Holy Land right now. So this does affect us all. If this conflict moves from a political conflict, which it always has been, it's not about the Bible. It's about the colonization of the land of Palestine and people trying to get their land and rights back. And then another group of people trying to have a state run along ethno-religious lines as a Jewish state. If it moves into a religious conflict, we're all screwed, and it's going there.
I'll go ahead and stop it there. So this is over 2 hours long. You can find it on Timcast IRL to see the rest of that interview. But I wanted to stop it right at that point where Max said, like, if this turns into a religious conflict, we're all screwed. That is heavily important. So I feel the same way. And the other thing that I wanted to add as well is notice what he said there. This is not about the Bible. We've been saying this for a long time, that it's about colonization. And I really do wish more people would wake up. And I can't, say that enough. I can't say that enough. Let's go ahead and go to some of the comments here. Yeah, Notori, it's on YouTube. Notori said, is this on YouTube? Have Robert and Max had the debate yet? No. Nope. Thank you, Trauma Queen. Scary to see Europeans banning pro-Palestinian protests and flags. The people in Gaza need our support. They have no one. Their fight is our fight. I 100% agree. Like I said, the same thing could happen to some of us. Thank you, P. Smith. Unit will create chaos if the U.S. screws with Iran. Sebastian said, why does he wear a beanie? I don't know. Thank you for this as well, P. Smith. Unit 910 will create chaos if the U.S. screws with Iran. Thank you, Sam. I saw the full video. Surprisingly, it was a better conversation than the crap on TYT. The guy named Ian seemed the most reasonable of the three. Thank you, Sam. All right, let me get that comment on Rockfin. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Roger. If you see the public being propagandized when their heartstrings being tugged as the argument is being made to send money, arms, resources abroad, remind them that Congress is quick to cut the check. The president is quick with the pen to sign and send abroad to prop up military campaigns. Yet, when it comes to Maui, East Palestine, Flint, Baltimore, Jackson, San Francisco, LA, New York City to combat housing, H2O, healthcare, our check gets lost in the mail. 100% there, Roger.